It's basically a permit for you to spend money in France without the French having too much in the way of responsibility to you. Welcome back to the Americans in Paris. I'm Stephen, and today I'm going to be talking about the long-term stay visitor visa. In my last video, I talked about the origin story, how I came to France in the first place, and today I'm going to talk about the mechanism that I used, which was, in this case, a visitor visa. You have to realize, as I said in that video, there wasn't a lot of information available in 2012, 2013 about how to get to France without a spouse or work visa or anything like that. And so I just looked at what was the lowest hanging fruit, and that was the visitor visa. And I didn't know about the visa that I would go on to hold, the visa that I currently hold, the Profession Liberale visa. My mentality was get to France, then figure it out. That's what I was thinking. That is not what I recommend today. And in fact, when I do consultations with people, and if you'd like to consult more about France, there'll be a link in the description below to ask about that. I try to get a sense from people, what's your 5-year plan? What's your 10-year plan in regards to France? And once they articulate that to me, whether it's, I want to have a job, I want to get married, I want to have citizenship, I just want to see how it is for a few years, I can then look at which visa makes the most sense for them and then start preparing them for that visa. The visitor visa is for people, and I'm going to be referring to it. The technical, you'll see a lot of letters together. It's VLSTS. This is visiteur, long séjour, titre de séjour. So this is a renewable long-term stay visa. There is a VLST, which is a non-renewable. This is something maybe you just want 9 months, 10 months, you're here for a semester, you're here for some special program. So I'm speaking specifically about the VLSTS, the visitor visa is what I'll call it for the rest of this video. It is for people who want to stay in France long-term and are not necessarily interested in citizenship for whatever reason. You may be able to get a 10-year card from a visitor visa status after 5 years of continuous residence, but that is by no means guaranteed. So some people will say, well, Stephen, I could be a visitor for 5 years, then I transition to a 10-year card, and then after I work in France for 5 years, then I can apply for citizenship. That's true, but that's an indirect route. So you would be getting citizenship via your 10-year card, and you can obtain a 10-year card from any number of visas, not necessarily from visitor visas. So if you think that's a slam dunk that you're definitely going to do that, there are people who sometimes don't get 10-year cards and they're coming from work visas, a higher rated visa. So just be clear that if you are interested in citizenship, truly, not just, oh, that would be nice, and that would be a conversation about citizenship, and there'll be a future video on citizenship versus residency. But if you're really focused on that, then the visitor visa may not necessarily be the best path for you. But we can talk about that, as I say, in a future video. For now, the big thing that you have to realize is all visas, not just in France, but in many countries, and I'm saying this having gotten visas to multiple countries for various reasons. I just recently got a visa to go to China this summer for vacation. And for the first time in my life, they asked for the birth certificate or equivalent. So in this case, a passport would do. And my father's deceased, so death certificate. So I had to present my father's death certificate and my mother's birth certificate to get a tourist visa to go to China. So everybody has different requirements, okay? But I've never had to present my parents' proof of anything to get a visa before. And I've gotten visas to Nigeria, I've gotten visas to Laos, lots of other places. So this is all to say that when you're thinking about getting a visa, you have to think about what are they really examining? And for the Chinese, I suppose they were looking at evidence of who I was. So in relation to France, I'll give you 2 examples. For example, if I have an au pair visa, all the rest of it is formalities. Here's my name, here's my address, etc. But what they're really looking for is, do you have a contract with a family? If you don't have a contract with a family and all the rest of your application is in order, you're going to get denied. Same thing for a student visa. If everything is in order in your student visa and you don't have a copy of an enrollment in a French institution, you're going to get denied. So the key documentation for a visitor visa is means of income. And the easiest way to go about this is savings. So that could be in a 401k, this could be in a savings account, it could be you, if you're a younger person, you could be put on the name of your parents' account and you have a printout showing that you have what the French see demonstrable access to this money, whether or not you're going to use it. The route that most people have to take, the route that I took, is here's my means of employment. And so I provided a letter from at that time. The funny thing is I had sold my company and the owner was employing me as a tutor. So I'd run this tutoring company for many years and I had a large demand still of referrals. So I was continuing to teach those students via Skype and other means. And I was working for this new owner. The new owner wrote a letter saying, yes, Steven's working for me. He's going to make this much per month. I presented that as my form of income to the French and they approved my visa. So I am not preaching about this as an intellectual theory. It's something that I've done. It's then something that was incorporated into my French tax returns. I file tax returns timely by law, as I have throughout my entire time in France. And I've helped other people do it. So I've helped, I don't want to say hundreds, but dozens. I don't want to say hundreds because I don't think it's been 100, but I would be something like 70, 80, 90 people at this point get visitor visas in which they show the proof of employment, remote employment by their employer. Now, there's an entire group of angry Karens, I don't know why, or self-interested scam artists, people who want you to pay $4,000 or $8,000 for their Profession Liberale course, in which they tell you you can't possibly do that. If you remote work in France, you are breaking the law. You have to realize the illogic of this. If I'm an American businessman and I take a week off and I put my family on vacation and I stay at the hotel and I work, according to their definition, I'm remote working in France, which means I'm breaking the law. And so why would a law apply to a resident of France, but not to a tourist? I think this is that question. So this idea that once I start remote working in France, I've broken the law. Oh, no, it's only if you're a resident. Okay, but where does it say that? The reality is that law in France changes slowly over time. The law governing my visa went into effect around the time of Louis XIV, to give you some sense of things. So things change slowly in France. Other nations in Europe have put together digital nomad visas, all that out. France has not done that. And there may come a time in which they may say remote work is not permissible. But these two parts of the government don't talk to each other. The Department of Taxation, the Ministry of Finance, does not speak to OFI, who is the immigration office. So OFI and the immigration are approving people who say they're going to work remotely. And the people who are on Team Karen saying, you can't do that, you're breaking the law, this is wrong, they are not willing to see that there is at best a disagreement between government agencies or an ambiguity in the law. And it can be very well argued if there's any sort of trouble. They try to scare up this thing like you're going to get arrested and deported from France, but they can't produce a single instance of anyone ever getting in trouble for remote working in France, ever. So once they did, they might have some credence, but up until that time, it's just a bunch of scaremongering. So I've written an article about it. I'll put a link to it in the description, and it's been fought over for years now. So I can only articulate my own position. And within the article, I even make their counter arguments. I would say, these are the arguments they make. I understand some of the merits of it. When I say I have a dog in the fight, insofar as I did it myself and I've helped other people, yes, I have a dog in the fight. But if France ever makes a ruling and says it's not allowed, I'm okay with that too. I'm looking at what is available now, and that's how I advise my clients, and that's how I'm advising you, strangers on the internet who found this video. In the end, I had my visitor visa for 2 years, and I switched to a Profession Liberale visa, which I'll talk more about in my next video. And I'm really glad I did it that way. There was so much I had to learn about France, and having to immigrate and start a business at the same time, I think would have been really challenging for me. I'm not saying I couldn't do it. And in fact, I advise many clients to do it, to shortcut what I did. They start right with the Profession Liberale visa instead of doing what I did, which was a slight detour through visitor. I do that with the advice saying, just please keep in mind, you're going to be immigrating, which is its own full-time job, and you're also going to be starting a business, which is a full-time job, and you're going to have to do that. You're going to have to do that at the same time. And if they're ready to take on that task, and many have successfully, I'm proud of them, then go for it. But if you think that might be too much for you, then what's the rush? What's the rush? I always tell people, what's the rush? In their mind, they're coming from where I was when I started my journey. It's like, I have to get citizenship as quickly as possible and then I'll be safe. And they don't realize residency is 99% citizenship. And if you have a privileged passport, like the US passport, the EU passport doesn't give you that much more in terms of travel privileges around the world. It gives you more in terms of living and working in Europe, for sure. It's the most powerful passport in the world for that. But if your goal is to travel places and you have a Class A passport like a US passport, French passport doesn't give you much more than that. And as I say, we'll talk more about that in the video about residency versus citizenship. And as I say in my next video, I'll talk about the Profession Liberale visa. In the meantime, if you'd like to learn more, head out to theamericaninparis.com. You'll find lots of articles there covering pretty much every issue you can think of, not just governmental bureaucracy stuff, but how to adapt to life in France. Where do I go to buy this? Where do I go to buy that? That's also in this book, 29 Days to France. You'll see a link to buy that on the website, as well as in this description. I also have courses for different visas, and you'll hear different perspectives. This is, as I say, The Americans in Paris. This is a YouTube channel together with Molly Sebrier. But we have lots of other writers on The American in Paris. And if you're ever interested, if you like what we're doing over there and you're interested in writing, there's a link on the blog. We'll also put a link in the description for you to consider writing as well. And we always pay for our work. As always, until next time, à bientôt.